Hey Camille, thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Steve Bentley, and I am on I was going to say the phone, but this is a Zoom call with a really amazing friend of mine, Camille Lawson. I've known her for over a dozen years now, and she's in Toronto, Canada. I'm down in near Houston, Texas. And we're just going to be talking a little bit today about hormones and athletic performance. So I'm sure we're going to be focusing more on women because I'm super interested in learning more about that because I am pathetically unknowledgeable about that thing. And Camille, you're amazingly knowledgeable about it. So tell us a little bit about your background, what you're passionate about, and I'm gonna fire some, I think, really amazing questions at you because this stuff I need to know, and I get questions on all the time, and I know you're the person that needs to answer them for me if I want to get the right answer. So tell us a little bit about yourself and
thank
where you're
you.
coming from. Oh my
Thank
goodness.
you, Stephen Bentley. That's a lovely thing to say. I feel the same way about you. Stephen has advised me numerous times on my workout regime and if I've had an injury and all sorts of things, even though I'm not at his level, but I try. So yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve. In my background is I'm actually a registered nurse, so I've got the medical background. And over the course of time, I also became a sexuality relationship therapist with a master's degree, and I was really passionate about helping people, couples in particular, and individuals kind of bring it all together in that healthy balance of mind, body, spirit. And along the way, I realized, Steve, that hormones play an unbelievable role in all of it: our physical health, our mental health, our sexual health, our mood, our relationships. And so I'm one of those people who likes to research things, and I went on to do a few more courses in studying, and it's really become my passion and my mission to help everyone, but I'm going to say women in particular, feel like themselves and feel like their best selves, and probably most importantly, be their own best health advocate. I always say you have to be informed and knowledgeable and understand how all these things play in the body, and then you really can achieve optimal health and feel awesome like every single day.
I love that. Cool. Menopause. Thank goodness I don't have to go through that specifically anyways. I know guys have issues with hormones as they get older for sure, but can we talk a little bit about menopause for women? Can you kind of go through the kind of before that period, kind of what's going on with women, during it, and then afterwards? Because I work with so many people, women, who have issues with that. And I want to find out some strategies to help them with that. But can you define it for kind of the before, during, and after periods and the right terms? Because I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing too.
Well, it's always good. I appreciate that about you. You want to know exactly what's accurate. Accurate is important, for sure. And men absolutely deal with hormonal, surges and decline, and we can talk about that in another interview because there's some pretty interesting stuff and things that men can do. But specifically for women, appreciating that women's hormones play a really complex role in women's bodies. We have over 50 hormones. A lot of people do not realize that. We tend to focus on estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but throw in there cortisol, our stress hormone. Insulin is a hormone. Thyroid. There are many. And throughout the course of a woman's life, really from teenagers, when our hormones really jump into play, and we all know what that's like. We remember being that teenager who can't, we were looking at the boys and the boys are looking at us, and that's normal. Into our 20s and 30s, when many women are of childbearing years, hormones are doing this. And then what happens, specifically called perimenopause, which is the time leading up to menopause. So let me start at the back end and define menopause. Is when a woman has ceased to have a period for the 12 consecutive months. And what that indicates is that her ovaries, which are the primary place where we make our primary main hormones, really have shut down. They are no longer making those hormones. Now, it's not all despair because we have a few backups that I'll tell you in a minute. But perimenopause can actually start at as young as mid-30s. And that's interesting because a lot of people don't know that, and absolutely can start for many women in their early 40s, or it may not start until their early 50s. To go into perimenopause anytime from, say, 38 to about 55 would be considered normal. So you can kind of see why there's confusion, right, Steve? Because
It's not one age, right? It's
Right.
period that could be different.
It is a big period. And some of the symptoms, and if when you're listening, kind of listen for your own self and think, am I feeling anything like this? So your mood may be off. You may notice that you're more irritable than usual. It may be related to your menstrual cycle, or it may not. You may just hit you at different times. You may notice that you are still eating and drinking and consuming the same kind of calories and things that you did, but you start to carry a little extra fat, particularly around the middle section. And that's really indicative of women going into perimenopause and menopause. Unfortunately, fatigue and trouble sleeping, that can often actually, Steve, be one of the first indicators, is just feeling more tired and your sleep is off. You're not even into hot flashes and all those things that we hear about. And then of course you wake up tired because sleep is so important. So that fatigue and lack of energy may well be the first sign. Hot flashes are a sign as our estrogen goes down. Women will start to notice that flushing that happens. And luckily, Steve, you will never experience it, because boy, I thought I'd be spared. And when I first got my first one, which was, I think I was age 55, I was like, I knew I taught this stuff, but this is what they're talking about. It's crazy. And
I don't like this.
Really is. You would not want one. No. So for some women, though, earlier in their 40s, they start to get, as their estrogen goes down, some hot flashes. And then when their estrogen goes back up, because their ovaries are, at this stage, what's happening is your ovaries are making hormones, and then they're making kind of less hormones, and they're making hormones, less hormones. Another one is loss of libido or sex drive. And, let's face it, that's a really important part of, and should be, of most of our lives. And it's really a big area of concern for a lot of women and their partners, that where did it go? They're like, oh, it's suddenly gone. And there's lots and lots of other symptoms, Steve, that come along in that perimenopausal period. And you get the drift that it can last. Oh my goodness, you can be in perimenopause for 10 years and wondering what the heck is going on with your body. And then could be in your 40s, could be in your early 50s, probably up to about age 57. You hit that time of menopause. So now what's happening, it's actually really interesting. Your ovaries are not making the hormones anymore, but your adrenal glands do kick in to some degree. And this is really important because our adrenal glands make our cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But so it's really important to have good adrenal health, as in we want them to function. They're not going to replace the hormones of our ovaries, but they're really going to help. And when you're really stressed, those adrenal glands don't work so well. So that's the basics. That's kind of the terminology. A little offshoot of some things that can happen that would be pertinent to athletes also, Steve. In perimenopause, women can get heart palpitations, and they actually think they're having a heart attack, when in fact they're not. And I would caution you to get it checked out if you're experiencing that. But many times it's actually caused by hormones, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is interesting, especially if you're an athlete and you're working hard and you're pushing your heart a lot, that you want to make sure you're on top of what's actually happening.
Yeah, for sure. And it can be very frightening because you think you've overtaxed yourself, and perhaps you are having a heart attack. So it's a pretty scary feeling.
So once women get into menopause, and at the back end of that, as they get older and older, because people today are just training and exercising and being active for a long time. It's not like they're just doing it in some short little period of time during their life. What are some of the things we're going to talk a little bit about, how to adapt and how being in menopause and these different stages affects athletic performance. But at the end of that, is there things going to change back, or do they have to deal with it from what we're going to talk about today? It's not like a natural thing where things are good, they get sort of progressively worse, and they're bad for a while, and then what? Is it kind of stays there if they don't do anything, or what's the deal?
That is such a great man question. I love that.
I want to make it sound like I don't know what I'm talking, or that I know what I'm talking about, but I don't really know what I'm talking about.
That really is a good question, because so Something I'm asked a lot, I'll answer it this way, is people will say how frustrated they are. They're an athlete or they're not, but they're working out, they're training, they're doing all that stuff, and they just can't lose that stubborn middle body fat. They're tired, all of those things that we've talked about. So does it get better? My answer to that is you actually can't, so per se, diet and exercise past a hormone imbalance. You do want to address some of the hormonal imbalances, which you can using the right kind of nutrition and getting those hormones that we can control. Because does it come back, Steve? Regret. It doesn't. When the estrogen is low, it stays low. We get our snippets of it, as I said, progesterone, testosterone. But are there things that we can control? That would be our insulin, absolutely, our cortisol, our thyroid function. There are for sure hormones that make a big difference that can significantly affect how we feel and our weight and performance. So yes, we're changing, we're growing older, and you're quite right. What I see is women and men are performing extremely well athletically into, we never would have thought that was possible before, would we? Well into their 70s. I saw a guy 80 the other day who was running marathons, 85. Crazy, but true.
And I know so many great women who are older and killing it and doing really, really well despite what their body's trying to do to slow them down. So I know there's ways of getting through it. So I'm looking for your answers there and seeing how you sort of respond to all that. But I've got a couple quick questions here. So in terms of more specifically athletic performance. So in athletic performance to me means weight, because if I can help somebody release excess weight, they're going to perform better, right? They're going to go faster. Strength, it's not really a speed thing, but if they are going to feel stronger and be able to do more, they're going to be able to go faster. And then the other one would be recovery. That's a big thing. So how does menopause, perimenopause, menopause, how does that affect things like weight? You already talked about that. That's going to sort of add excess weight on, usually around their belly. So that's not cool. So we're going to talk about ways of getting rid of that. But I guess more specifically here, because you've already addressed the weight issue, how about recovery and strength? How does decreasing hormones affect those? I'm going to guess it's negative, but if you can talk about that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, some studies go as far as to show that with declining estrogen, which is such an important hormone for ligaments, for skin, for muscles, with the declining estrogen that is going to happen, that explains why sometimes women will actually get more injuries. So that's why part of why they have to pay attention to that. The theory, it's a theory, but it's probably well proven. Lower estrogen causes ligaments to become a little more pliable and more stretched out and that sort of thing. So that can cause, issues. And so it's really important for prevention, obviously, for the right stretching and that sort of thing, like knowing that might be, something that we have to pay attention to. Cortisol is such a big one, our stress hormone, because cortisol is, especially for athletes, cortisol is produced when we're stressed, but our body doesn't distinguish between mental, all the stresses that are hitting us, and physical. And as an athlete, you want to be stressing your body, right? You're the coach, that, you're pushing your body to get stronger, to get faster. But one of the byproducts of that is the cortisol made by your adrenal glands gets sky high. Cortisol is considered a foundation hormone. And this is actually a really key tidbit to put it all together, Steve, because if I can leave people with one big thing, if you can manage your cortisol, all the other offshoot hormones play back into that cortisol. So it's the first and most significant thing that you want to do. And one of my best recommendations is adaptogens. Adaptogens have been used by athletes for a very long time, but they really do make a difference. And I know, I personally use a nutritional system. I know you do as well, and lots of people do, where the adaptogens are all in one mineral drink. Well, I'm all about the easy, so I like that. And if anyone wants to know more about that, we can certainly answer that later. But getting that great nutrition. And the second piece would be to keep the lean muscle mass on and building that lean muscle mass, because as we age, that we increase, our muscle mass declines. And so now you have, female athletes in particular, the hormones are already down, which are going to cause even more muscle loss, skeletal loss. Estrogen plays into our bones very much. So you're looking at bone density, that sort of thing. So athletes want to pay attention to that, really making sure they're addressing the cortisol issue effectively and balancing their diet with the good macros and micros. And we can talk about a few tips around that, because recovery is important, very important.
So that'll, the recovery is going to come out of their body's ability to manage stress, obviously, and give your body the right building blocks, which I'm going to ask you some questions, because I think I know your answer about macronutrients and micronutrients, because that's how I feel about it, but I was going to have you sort of expand upon that a little bit more. But in terms of cortisol from a performance point of view, if I get somebody doing too much training, too hard, too much aerobic training, like they're just running all the time, their cortisol levels are going to be really high.
Oh.
And that's not going to be good for their recovery or their overall health from the sounds of things.
Not at all. And that really plays back into some tips on diet, because what you're talking about is inflammation. So we know that, long distance running, for example, jacks up the inflammation. That's a lot of because of the cortisol, as well as other things. So I have a few tips, and I know you know so much about the keto diet and making it healthier. And what I really look at, especially for females, and this would be so applicable for your female athletes who are listening, is you want to take a lower carbohydrate diet, not necessarily a full-blown keto, and definitely not a traditional keto. Traditional keto with the high saturated fat actually makes the body much more acidic, which is the opposite of alkaline, and it makes the body more inflamed. So everything we want to do to help our hormones and help recovery and help our performance is have the body be alkaline and reduce inflammation, right? So the inherent training and stress that we put on jacks it up. So our job in recovery and in our food and our drinks is to counter that. And what I found is if you can green it up, I call it, make your diet super green. And I mean, lots of that kale and Swiss chard and, into your shakes, into your salads. So your carbohydrates are going to be primarily all these great vegetables and cauliflower and broccoli, avocados, your healthy, good fats. So you're going to have some saturated fat, but not as much. What that does, Steve, is alkalize, reduce the inflammation, and so that whole muscle recovery and the adrenals that we're trying to support our adrenal glands, it all starts to function better. And the nice bonus for you ladies is you'll see hot flashes will get better. The middle body fat starts to drop off. There's another little tip I'll tell you after, but it's quite noticeable. Mood improves. And you're really keeping your sugars, your fructose low. And when you become more aware of just how much sugar is in what we consume, sports recovery drinks. I know you understand those, Steve. You long have. I mean, there's 38 grams of sugar in most of those drinks, not to mention all the dye. You know what that dye does to your mood? It skews your brain chemistry big time. So you want to choose your products really carefully, what you're putting into your body, and become a huge label reader. Big deal.
So in terms of macronutrients, which are carbs, proteins, and fats, I always think about a pie graph or chart or whatever. You got 100%, right? I like pie as well, but just let's focus on non-food because I'm going to start cooking dinner soon. So you got a certain percentage of carbs, certain percentage of protein, a certain percentage of fat. So what I've done for an awfully long time, and I can go back and forth between keto and normal eating, but normal eating for me is about 25% carbs, 25% protein, about 50% fat, healthy fat. So would that be where you're looking for when you say keep your carbs kind of moderate or even lower? Because a keto is 5-10% carbs, 25% protein, and 70% fat. I think sustainability, that's kind of hard for people.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. I mean, you're wearing the green shirt, so you already get my alkaline argument. That isn't sustainable. And that's, there is no quick fix. If you really want to feel well and have your best performance, I would say more like at least 10% carbs, but you're choosing your carbs again very wisely, looking for the alkaline type of carbs and the greens. I think proteins, I like your sort of 25%, and you want to get the good quality fats up there. 70%, which is sort of a traditional keto, is pretty hard. It's hard for most people to get that, but you can get 50% good quality fats. Who doesn't love a lot of olive oil and avocados and MCT oil in your shake and that sort of thing? So I think you're following something that is sustainable. Food, as we both agree, Steve and I both love good food, and wine has to taste good. And we're a human race, likes to eat and we like to eat well. And so you just want to be aware that most of the time you're putting in, the right things. Apple cider vinegar's one of those supplements that I'm a big advocate of. It's very alkalizing to the body. At least, an ounce before a meal. It helps with your digestion. It's going to help with your insulin. Really helps. So it's helping hormonally, and that's one that has made a big difference, I think.
Now, how do you take apple cider vinegar? Because I just cannot drink that in water. I put it in olive oil and put it on a salad, but how do you take it?
I get a shot glass, I have to tell you, and I dilute it with just a tiny bit of warm water, and I throw it back, and it's just one of those things. You can dilute it a lot and it'll certainly taste better. The salad dressing is a great idea, but I really do want people to have at least that ounce before a meal because it's worth it. So I'm going to tell you, it's one of those things that you should just make it happen.
You're a badass. You're doing that with apple cider vinegar. Okay, well, that's cool. Okay, so how about, because I could talk to you as we do for hours, right? We talk about so many awesome stuff. So we're going to have to do another hormone talk afterwards. But I got a question about micronutrients, because we're talking about macronutrients there, proteins, carbs, and fats. And I know you're a big advocate of good quality protein. You got me on a system 12 years ago that's been amazing for helping me feel and look great up into my 50s, and thank you so much for sharing that with me. But in terms of micronutrients, because that's something else that you've helped me understand too, and introduced me to, how does that specifically impact menopause and helping people? So you talked about the macronutrients and getting good quality, keeping the carbs moderate or low, and getting good quality healthy fats in to sort of mitigate cortisol issues and helping your hormones function effectively. What effect do micronutrients have? Because I know the food today is woefully deficient in nutrition. So I add stuff in. I'm supplementing all the time with powders and vitamins. They're all whole food based. But how does that affect menopause and getting through that in a way that's going to be effective and help people feel good? You mentioned adaptogens earlier. So I would look at that as a micronutrient. So but you can expand on that and talk a little bit more about supplementation and micronutrients.
Sure. And I agree completely. Micronutrients, and you can look at that as trace minerals that used to be abundant in our soil and our food, as close as, 25 years ago, simply are not there now. And let me talk about adaptogens, and I'll share a very fast story. But adaptogens are a well-known herbal combination of things, interesting names like rhodiola, shilajit. A lot of people have heard of ashwagandha. That's one that's fairly well known. They really help, as I said, manage stress, both physical stress and mental stress. And most people, especially in North America and a lot in the world, would say when they rate their stress level on a 0 to 10, 10 being the most, many, Steve, put themselves at an 8 to 10, 24/7. And, we could do another whole podcast on cortisol and the effects. And in fact, we should, because I told you it's the number one thing to mitigate. But if people can do nothing else, I said, getting the cortisol under control and balanced, and adaptogens are like miraculous. And because I have this mineral drink, I just love it. I drink it, and it's almost instantly you feel more calm. So the stressors aren't gone, but your ability to cope is much better. And for the athletes, the muscle recovery time is better. It's very noticeable. So adaptogens are really a key thing to look at for sure. Another example, and here's my quick story. I'm like you, I've just always been interested in health my whole life. So one would assume that I have all my minerals and my micronutrients all at the right level. So I had all my hormones and everything tested about 8 months ago, and I was enormously deficient in magnesium. And of course, because I like to research everything, I found out that I'm not alone. Many people, especially women, are deficient in magnesium. Well, guess what magnesium helps with? Our hormones, our energy, our mood. Magnesium is amazing for sleep and for your athletes, Steve. Magnesium has been shown to help muscles relax after intense exercise. So as you know, I play a lot of tennis. I have noticed a huge difference. And specifically, I want people to take magnesium glycinate. So magnesium glycinate, there's numerous forms of magnesium. It is by far the most well absorbed. If you take it at bedtime, it will help you sleep. About 200 milligrams. You can take more. It should give you a deep, restful sleep. But the muscle recovery, I mean, I'd love you to experiment more with it with some of your female athletes, because that micronutrient alone is of critical importance. You know, and I could go on. Again, there's lots of things that I personally take. I know you do as well, but that's going to help women a
How,
lot.
I love that. I'm going to ask you two more questions because then I'm going to have to shut myself down. Otherwise,
Okay.
so probiotics in fasting, the not eating part of it. So jump into probiotics because I take those all the time, and
Yes.
one of those things that almost feels like nothing's happening, but I know when I stop taking them, I don't like the way I feel. So how do probiotics, I guess, forget about me, but how do they affect women in terms of going through menopause? Are they beneficial or not?
Yeah, absolutely they are, because as we get older, men and women, but women, let's focus on us. As we get older and the hormonal changes, we don't make our own probiotics, you know, the way we used to. And we know now that our gut health is probably the most important part of our body that we need to support. So if you don't have good probiotics going when you're, you know, to help you digest your food and create the right bacterial system in your gut and in the entire body, what happens is you're not actually going to absorb the nutrients in the foods that you are eating, or if you're spending money, like many of us do, on superfoods and extra nutritional things, you're not going to get bang for your buck, frankly, because your body can't absorb that if your gut bacteria isn't what it should be. So a really good probiotic, probably best taken at bedtime, is a really important way to support that good bacteria growth. And it's interesting now, we know this, it's quite definitive in the literature. There's actually different strains for different things that you might be experiencing. So I would encourage people to look into that and to find out. But it's all about your gut flora, your gut bacteria. So very important. And the second one was.
So I love to incorporate fasting,
Oh,
cellular
yes.
cleansing into my
Yes.
athletes program in order to help them get more fat adapted, lean out,
Yes.
just eliminate impurities and toxins from their system. That's great for all that stuff, but how does it impact, if at all, menopause? And is it something that says a strategy that could be beneficial, or what are your thoughts on
Absolutely. And that, thank you for the reminder, because yes, intermittent fasting or a fasting period of 24 to 48 hours with some nutritional support has been shown to actually jack up human growth hormone. I'm not an advocate of taking extra human growth hormone at all. You can really, anyway, that's another story. You can mess around with
I'm
it.
glad you said that, but yes, I agree.
It has a lot of nasty side effects that people do not realize. However, what if you could actually jack up your own, which you can with intermittent fasting and fasting. The first day of fasting, I think the studies are around 300, 500%. The second day goes up almost 1,000%. That doesn't last indefinitely, so it's a nice thing to incorporate into your routine, either intermittent fasting daily, Steve. Everything I'm reading says anywhere between 14 and 16 hours between your meal time. So for example, if you had a dinner at 7 p.m., then you wouldn't perhaps have your breakfast or shake until maybe 10 o'clock the next morning. So it really makes a big difference. It also is unbelievably great for our insulin, and insulin is such an important hormone, right up there with cortisol, really.
Yeah.
So fasting plays a huge role in balancing our insulin to function better. So women are going to feel a lot better when their blood sugars are balanced, and you're not going to crave things in the same way. So getting that insulin under control, which the fasting will help with, makes a big difference for that. So absolutely, hormones, yes, I'm an advocate of it.
Because I've noticed some amazing results from my athletes when I'm getting them to do intermittent fasting and then fasting days and then incorporating training into all that. And I've seen good positive results. So I just wanted to make sure that that was also another great strategy for.
You're right on track.
Awesome. Well, Camille, thank you so much. Do you have I think you have a website, right, that you could send people to if they've got more questions about? I know you're super busy, but if somebody wanted to hire you to get more in-depth on hormones and how to certain issues, what website they could go to?
Yeah, there's two things they can look at. One is my name, so CamilleLawson.com, CamilleLawson.com. That's probably the easiest. There's some hormone information on there. Also, I have some ebooks. So if you go to howtofeellikeyourselfagain.com, that's pretty easy. Howtofeellikeyourselfagain.com. I have an ebook on hormones, and I have an ebook on love hormones. And so they're yours. And once you sign up, I can send them to you and download them. They're very helpful.
Perfect. Camille, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to get back on here again and talk about cortisol and growth hormone and guy hormones next time.
Okay.
Women are way more important in my life than I am. So I wanted to make sure we talked about that first. So thank you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it.
Bye, Steve. Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.